Howdy everybody. Wanted to do, finally, a video review today on my Lowa Zephyr hiking boots. Now, the particular version that I own is actually the Task Force version. So I ordered these by mistake, but the main difference between this version and the normal version, which is what you will mostly find in your local outdoor stores, is the TF version has a more prominent monowrap upper, which you can see here, that adds support, and it also has full eyelets as opposed to half or 2/3 eyelets. But overall, it's going to fit the same and feel the same, so this review is not mutually exclusive to the TF version. So before we move on, I wanted to go over some general specs about this specific pair of Lowa Zephyrs. So this pair ran me at $185 retail. If you decide to get the one that has the Gore-tex liner, it's going to run you about $200 because a liner always adds between $15 and $30. The Lowa Zephyrs have a 3/4 length shank, which a shank is the support that goes throughout the bottom, throughout the spine of the sole to give it support from contortion and from flexibility. And what it means if it says 3/4, it means the shank goes 3/4 of the way of the shoe. So in this case, it's a nylon shank that's 3/4, it's going to go about there. Now the length of the shank is one indicator as far as stiffness, another is the thickness, and this one's a pretty flexible shank. You can see how much I can flex this boot. I've put about 200 miles into this boot, so it hasn't been worn too much, but it has some good flexibility, whereas on my Salomon Quests, those were much stiffer because they had a much thicker shank. So I actually prefer this style because I wanted to have a boot that had a bit more flexibility. Now, as far as the weight goes, the average listed on the REI website lists these at 2 pounds 10 ounces, which on the Lowa website, they listed at 2 pounds 6 ounces. So I think what Lowa did is they measured the smallest pair of shoes they could find. So perhaps they weighed a size 7.5 or a size 8. So 2 pounds 10 ounces, a little bit heavy, but it does a really good job of spreading that weight uniformly around the boot. So it feels a little bit lighter than it actually is. The reason I purchased this boot is I needed another backpacking boot to replace my Salomon Quest. Now, I liked my Salomon Quest, but it was a bit too stiff, and even if it wasn't that heavy, it just felt heavy. It didn't feel like you had the flexibility or just a natural movement of being able to walk. Now, for some people who maybe are hunting and packing out meat or wearing a very heavy pack, a shoe that has a really stiff sole and a strong shank that doesn't want to move at all or contort, maybe that's a good option for them. For me, the most I'm going to be carrying backpacking is about 30 pounds. I try to carry no more than 25. So I didn't need a super heavy duty boot. I needed something that was a bit more flexible, had a bit more play, but it would also last a very long time. This particular boot has a polyurethane plastic sole, which most of the cheaper hiking boots and most other hiking boots that we have at REI have an EVA foam sole. Now the EVA foam is going to be soft and cushy out of the box, but over time, because it is a foam sole, it is going to break down and wrinkle, and you can notice that in older boots. They really get soft. If you ever see a Keen that someone's worn for a very long time, or a Barrel, or one of those cheaper boots, they look very squishy. With the sole like this, because it's plastic, even though you're sacrificing some comfort, you're getting a sole that's going to retain its shape and last a much longer time. So I've heard of people getting 750 to 1,000 miles easy out of these boots. Now, for the most part, they're rated between 500 to 750, but I've read stories about these really performing. As far as the upper, you have a split leather upper, which has the feeling and texture of like a hardware glove from a hardware store. So if you've ever been like gardening and you worn one of those gloves, that's exactly how it feels. It's not too thick, so it's not going to be too insulated, which I like. The problem if you have a full grain leather boot is it makes your foot super hot and sweaty. Also, this has a mixture of mesh built in, which makes it a lot more breathable. And on the interior, it has, I believe, a nylon coating around it, or a weave, which is going to wick the moisture away from your foot much more effectively than the leather would. So this is a non-Gore-tex boot, and because I live in the Southwest, I live in Arizona, there's really just no need to add a Gore-tex or a waterproof liner. The negatives of having a waterproof liner are it insulates your foot, and then, it's considered a waterproof liner, but if you go in a really bad storm, it's going to get wet regardless. Some seam, some little part of the boot is going to fail, and instead of having a boot that's quickly dryable, like a breathable boot like this, you have a waterproof boot which takes a much longer time to dry. And even I've met people from Washington or Oregon and places that rain a lot, and even they will tell you, like, look, having a waterproof boot is kind of pointless. I know my foot's going to get wet anyways. I would rather have a boot that is more breathable. So the great thing about Lowas is they're generally pretty wide boots. So if a customer comes into REI and they need a wider boot, I usually bring out a Lowa, a Merrell, and then also a Keen just to see which one fits best for them. This is the medium version. Now, even if somebody has a wide foot, I'll usually bring out the medium version. If they really need the wide version, which we do have at REI, I'll bring that out. But for the most part, a medium version is more than adequate. The great thing about this boot also is that you have a high degree of volume on the inside. What does that mean? It means it gives you lots of space for your toes to spread when impacting the ground. It also means that you have the ability to fit a thick insole in there. So if you look at Superfeets come in really thin versions, which are a little bit harder, and really big, softer versions. So with this boot, because it has a high amount of volume and space, you can actually put a nice, good-sized Superfeet in there comfortably and not have to worry about it constricting your foot at all. Now here is the normal insole for the Lowas, and these are the insoles that leave little to be desired. They're very flimsy, they're very cheesy, they're just really meant to be thrown away and replaced with a much better insole. So let's get down to the nitty-gritty. What do I actually think about this pair of boots? And I have to say, I absolutely love this pair of boots. Now, are they perfect? No, but they do everything I've ever asked of them. They're great for backpacks, they're great for long hikes. You know, if I'm going on a short hike, I'm probably not going to use this boot because I prefer to have a trail runner or something that's a bit lighter. But I've done a lot of hikes that were longer hikes with some of my friends who, even on 15, 20-mile hikes, they'll still wear their trail runners or in some cases chacos. And they're always bragging about how light they are and how fast they can get up the mountain. But once we're coming down the mountain, especially if we're encountering loose rock, this boot eats them alive. It almost feels like an ankle brace going downhill because that's ultimately what's really important as far as stability is how your heel fits into the heel cup and how stable the sole is. So in this case, when you're walking downhill, again, it almost feels like an ankle brace. It's locked right at the ankles and you just have a very straightforward motion, and I've never really had problems rolling my ankle at all with these boots. A lot of customers have misconceptions as far as stability. They think that the mids of boots really add the most stability or a high boot adds stability. Now that's true in some cases, like on mountaineering boots where they're really tight or super high, then you're gonna get a lot more stability and support. But for a boot like this that has a really flimsy outwall, really the support just comes, the added benefit is just protecting your ankles from abrasion and keeping debris from jumping in the top of the hopper. As far as the soles on these, I've worn these between 200 and 250 miles and they still hold up. They look as good as the day I got them, to be honest. They don't have any tears along the sidewalls. There's no parts that are wearing down. Honestly, they look fantastic. The only wear and tear you can see is on the toe box there and on the heel there, but that's totally expected. These things are very breathable, so I've never had a problem with my foot sweating profusely. You know, I mentioned before, if you get a waterproof boot, there's a really good chance that your foot's gonna be really sweaty. And then, you know, if your foot's sweating like crazy, it kind of defeats the purpose of having a waterproof boot because the water's being trapped in there because of your sweat, not because of external forces. The insoles, like I said, they could be better. That's really the one gripe I have with this boot is the really bad insoles. And that's where a brand like Oboz really comes into play because they make great stock insoles. But because this has a very wide toe box, you can easily fit a new pair of Superfeets or soft sole insoles. Haven't had any problems with the laces. I really like that they have the full eyelets because they don't want to pull out, which is the problem I've had with other boots that only have half eyelets is the laces want to detach. Nice and flexible, not too stiff. Like I said, this is what I wanted. And overall, man, this boot just really kicks ass. I'm definitely going to be buying more pairs. We get guys who come back who are in the military who get these pairs and they buy them over and over and over again. So I just have to say, man, this boot really kicks ass. And if you guys are looking for a great longer hiker or an off-trail boot or a decent backpacking boot, or sorry, a great backpacking boot, this is going to be your best bet. Just make sure you try on the boots first. So what's best for me may not be the best for you. So you can talk about features all day and gimmicks and what the boot has and doesn't have, but if this doesn't fit your foot correctly, or Lowas don't fit your foot correctly, and Vasks fit better, go with the Vasks. Fit is always most important, and also a lot more important than the features. So keep that in mind, and yeah, keep an eye out for more videos from me in the future. Thanks, guys.